It's been fundamentally, it helped us grow our business probably 30% when we first brought it on by the amount of time it saved us and just the efficiency. So if you have any questions during the presentation, you know, I'm definitely big on interactive tutorials. Happy to answer them for you, and I can definitely answer it from the accountant's perspective also. So with that said, why don't we get started? First off, so with everybody that's here, how familiar is everybody with Ledgersync so far?
I'm only familiar with what I've heard through the Facebook group for Zero bookkeepers and accountants, but I've heard it's a possible alternative to HubDoc.
That is a very common use case for it, for sure. So I personally, I've never been as big of a fan of HubDoc. I've always preferred Ledgersync because I wanted to get more of that transaction line accounting detail. So they do serve two different purposes, but again, probably with the transaction line detail and then also having the check images and the deposit detail images, I find that very easy to work with, and where a big time savings is at. Excuse me, my words are working well today. So Ledgersync is fundamentally, it's a financial dashboard to where we're able to go in and we can actually access all of our clients' different bank accounts, credit card accounts, to get their statements, transactions, as well as check and deposit images. They recently just revamped their entire system, so they're kind of in the transition period from version 1 to version 2. And I have both pulled up to kind of give you a heads up on some of the different details of them. The transition to version 2 has made this a much faster and seamless application, and they're still building in more features as they go along. So what I'm going to do is let me jump into the basic platform here itself. Whoops. This is the dashboard of Ledgersync. So again, the concept is you would have your list of your different clients off to the side here, and should just make sure everybody is seeing Ledgersync at the moment, correct?
I can see it.
Perfect. Hate to be showing the wrong thing the whole time, it'd be worse. So this is your financial dashboard, your dashboard of your clients on the left-hand side here, where you would choose the client that you're trying to work on at that time. And then from there, you're going to have the different institutions, whether it's banking accounts or credit card accounts, would all be listed into the next column here. So for this example, we've got Marie's choosing a Chase. If we come in, we can see the different accounts that are connected onto it, as well as their different balances, dates things were updated. And then if we come into the calculator, this is the transaction table. So this is going to pull in line by line by line every single transaction that they would have going through a traditional bank feed. As you come into this, you can actually click on the pencil icon here, and you have the ability that you can modify the description, the payee, and the category. Now, these are all just manual enters. You'll click into it, type it as you wish, and then it would save back to this. Once you have all your information in here, if you've modified, put the payee name the way you would like, you then have the ability, you can go and you can export all of the transactions, selecting which ones you would like, of course, to either a QuickBooks, so a QBO file, an OFX file, or a CSV file. The QBO, of course, works for both Xero and QuickBooks Online, but it's really made for like QuickBooks Desktop. And the OFX, of course, works across all of them. The payee name that you populate into here will populate into that file as well, so you can use it for reference. Additionally, they've gone in and you can do additional searching through this platform. So for the description, we found this to be very useful, especially when you have a large number of accounts, to very quickly be able to search either for an amount, by a description, if I need to find a certain vendor. I found it's a little bit easier to do some searching here than some of the accounting platforms on the market. You can also, again, by taking advantage of like the debit and credit amounts, You can also, if you don't know a name of it, but you know an amount, again, it's a backup resource that can be used to really double check any of the information being fed through bank feeds on accounting platforms now. At the top here, we also have the view statements. So when you first set up your account with Ledgersync, it's gonna pull in all the transactions. You can actually pull in up to, I believe it's up to 2 years of transactions at this time. And you will then do a second push where you come in and you'll request the statements, and you can either request them one at a time, or you can actually do a 6-month update to be able to quickly grab all of the statements for any of the accounts that are connected. So you would literally see a PDF version of this actual, from this bank, basically. A key thing to know is when you're making a connection to a bank, it's going to pull all of the different connected accounts through that username and password, the security credentials. So if you have access to 4 different accounts, they're all going to be pulled right at that same time, okay? You can see a basic summary of the different accounts when everything was updated in case you need to do manual updates for everything. And then you also have the ability, of course, so that to invite your clients, excuse me, say it the right way. When you're inviting your clients, you can set them up to where you'll also be able to, you can choose whether you wish to send them an email that you custom design or just the traditional email invite that comes from Ledgersync. Any questions on some of the details and some of the screens at the moment?
I have a question.
Yeah.
If you have a client that has their personal and business accounts under the same login and credentials, I would pull in all those personal accounts. Is there any way to turn them off once they're in Ledgersync so we would not be pulling the data for them?
Very good question. So this is where I'm gonna transition somewhat over to show you guys version 1 at the moment, because they are, as I said, they're kind of building out. They rebuilt the application and they're bringing some of the features back over. Version 1, I'm going to click the top here. It's very similar to the same look. In this environment, yes, the user, so your client, when they would set it up, they would have the ability on their side to actually hide specific accounts that you were not supposed to see. However, for the accountant side of it, we do not have that control. But when the client sets it up, they absolutely can turn those accounts off for visibility-wise.
Is the plan to bring that into version 2.0?
From my understanding, yes, it is. They're actually, the biggest thing they're working on right away is the check images. So to me, one of the biggest value propositions of Ledgersync is their ability to pull in all the check details and deposit details depending on the bank. That process to pull that information is very time intensive. So it doesn't exist for all of the bank. They're basically working on it right now, and they expect by the end of August on the new platform, they'll have the majority of the larger banks pulled in so you could see all the deposit details. After that, I can have Maurice reach back out with more of an exact, project timeline of when those other features would be added into the new platform.
I have another question.
Sure.
When they pull in the checks, is there a way to export the checks into Xero so they can be attached to the transactions?
Very good question again. So at this time, no. You do have the ability, you can of course download the check images or you can save them, but it does not go direct in.
Okay.
Good question. Now, are you both using Xero specifically? Or everybody here?
We use Xero.
Okay.
And we have the same issue with HubDoc. Most of our bank accounts can't connect in HubDoc.
Karen, you understand.
Yeah,
it's very expensive to have we only have 1 or 2 banks that actually connect. And it's a pain. The connection always fails. And
sadly, that is very true. So bank feeds in general are very, very, they're a pain in the rear. It's just as simple as that. Are you familiar how most of the banks, like the major banks?
Just a little bit.
So here's the kind of 5,000-foot view, because it might help give a little more perspective of some of the challenges that you're experiencing. Majority of all bank feeds, even through the larger accounting platforms like Xero and QuickBooks, they actually, there's basically two ways to get to the data. One of those, and they call it, the terminology or the bad word is screen scraping. It's where you literally program the system to know exactly where this button is, and it's going to reference it and go and click it, grab it, save it, and it basically emulates a human being doing those clicks. Now, the difficulty with doing that is if the banks actually change the layout of their customer portals, well, now you have to go back and recode every single thing wherever the button is. And I'm sure you've noticed a lot lately, there's been a lot of financial institutions that are all updating their web portals or adding in new features, those type of things. So it's causing a lot of challenges where bank feeds keep breaking all the time. The alternative option is where you do like an API connection. So Xero first started to do that with Wells Fargo. QuickBooks has really been focusing on that with like Chase. And a lot of the bigger banks are starting to allow more and more of that. When you do it from that method, it's actually a direct API call and you get transactional details. But even then, like the check images and the statements, that still requires additional coding. So you will still see from time to time there's going to be some difficulties until the banks start to play nice with that. It's very frustrating. So part of the reason I wanted to show additional details in version 1, again, because that transition is it will take just a little bit of time until they revamp the version 2 to have all of these extra tools, but it's very, very powerful. For example, one of the things that we love having is the ability for the employee management. So you can add additional employees in, and you can segment what clients they're allowed to have access to and which ones they're not. We like to use that for our company where we have like office managers. We'll be able to invite an office manager in as if it's one of the employees, and they can now help us do a little bit more detail. They can be doing some of the searches if they need to, or on like deposit detail instead of having to just send the questions straight to us. So it's a good way to kind of empower that person and get them to be part of the team. Adding new banks, super easy. I should actually show you the process real quickly, even through the old one. When you're adding a new client, or if you add a new bank, you simply just click on the add a new bank account. It's going to pull up a menu for you to choose which one. Oops. Search for more banks. So you would basically pull up this menu and you can start to type in any of the institutions and sync it up really quickly. So I live in Ventura, so let's see if Ventura County Credit Union is here.
Do you know how many banks right now they have the ability to hook up to right now?
Joseph, do you remember?
Yes, it's 9,000.
Wow.
That's a lot of banks.
There, however, is no list to see what banks are on there. I mean, I'm from Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania has a lot of like small town banks.
Yeah.
Not that they're small. Not that they're small. They're kind of large, but I would just like to be able to search ahead of time and find out if some of these banks are part of it. But I can't find the list. A list.
Let's check. Let's try one. Let's see if I can get lucky and pull one up that you're thinking that might be difficult.
Citadel.
Citadel Federal Credit.
Yes.
Oh.
Nice.
What they've done, their list of banks is by far the biggest. It's actually one of my favorite. They made it easier for us whenever we needed to add a new bank, or if we had some kind of random one-off one, that we could get that activated and working. I found with some of the competitors, you kind of would have to put a request on a sheet, and hopefully there was enough people that were also requesting it to be able to gain access to that as well.
Yeah, that's pretty common.
Yeah, it's again time for the coding of all that stuff, right? It just takes a while to do it. So,
And what is the charge to request a new bank?
you know, I will have to have them follow back up on that again. Because they're just in the transition between the platforms, I don't want to give you the wrong information of how that will look.
Yeah, but we have the number. It's
okay.
135.
No, it increased. It's about $235.
Okay.
Which is it's totally worth it if you know if you don't have access to that to a bank and you can pass that on to your client. Absolutely worth it, right? The amount, again, if I come out of this, let's see here, the amount of time that we save every month by not having to go from bank to bank to bank to log in, to also go log in, find the check area, click on the first check, download the image, save it, you know, go to the next check, wait for that to load, download and save it, and go over and over and over again has just been, it's been huge. We literally, the first year we grew the business, our firm, probably 30% just because of the time we saved. It was amazing.
So when it comes to the statements themselves that you have coming in, can those be exported to like Xero files or QBO files or an external area, or do they just have to be downloaded and then uploaded manually?
Great question again. They are downloaded and then you would have to upload them elsewhere. However, I know, Joseph, they're working currently for the version 2 to use for share file, Smart Vault, Google Drive, and one other one also, right?
Yes. I'm thinking what the last one is.
Are they looking into Box at all?
I thought Maurice had said that they were. I don't personally use Box, so I haven't seen that. Let me just double check here. How do you like Box? Does it work well for you?
Yeah, it works well for us.
Let's see here. Where's my cloud one again? Profile backdating, client status, extraction, notification, support banks. Let's see here. You know, normally I thought I saw a button here that tells me my online options. We have had it set up actually going to ShareFile. So we were able to kind of map out through ShareFile for each of the clients, have all of the data go and be stored in there. But we've also had it to Google Drive. I think this will be one of those ones that, Joseph, we should probably follow up on, again, that product roadmap of exactly when those will be in version 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just so I understand, it's the transactional data itself that could actually be integrated with your accounting system?
So what the word integration is the key part that I want to make sure to stress. What this does is the platform will grab all the data and bring it here, and it will then give you the ability to export the transaction details, but it's exported like a QBO file.
Right.
So it does not go and push it through to the back end, which personally I think is a better thing. You've got a greater opportunity for duplication of transactions that way. So you would take this QBO, OFX, or CSV file, and you can upload it to any platform, any accounting platform that you'd like to use.
Right. Okay.
Any other questions on that part?
No.
So with the transaction aspect of it, they are actively working on. One of the areas that I always focus on is how can we improve, the capturing of payee names, the categories, that type of stuff. So they're actively working on building out that portion of the app as well. And during this transition time, it's a little unique to be in this transition time from version 1 to version 2. I can tell you this is going a great direction. Version 1 is an extremely robust application. Again, check images, so forth. But because of the amount of data it pulls, it was a little bit slower than some people would like. The version 2 is lightning fast now, super, super quick. Normally, if I was trying to pull up a statement, I can download it. The previous one, it would take a good 30, 40 seconds or so roughly. So you'll find this is very, very powerful. Let's see. Any other questions about the app?
I don't have any questions about the app, but I might have to sign off soon.
Okay.
How many users can you have per client? People who are able to log in and see the information. Is there a limit?
You know what, Joseph, I don't believe previously there was not, no. And I don't believe we would either. Hello, sorry for the other people I just were allowing to jump in and ask questions as well. Renee and Farshid. So, but back to your question, number of users, it was unlimited before. You could do as many as you want. It's not a per user charge.
Great. Thank you.
Absolutely. For the two people I just kind of promoted up to where you'd be able to ask questions, do you have any questions at the moment on the application, Renee, or maybe Christopher as well? Perfect. Okay. So again, for us at our company, Ledgersync has been a huge, huge help collecting all the information we need for each of our clients. We no longer have to go log into every single bank, go and grab the statements at the end of the month. They're all already accessible for us. We don't have to go grab each of the check images. The deposit detail, depending on the bank, and I want to stress that because not all financial institutions do that, the deposit detail is great. Super, super powerful. It's helped save us quite a bit of time. I personally like the fact that when you are dealing with the checks, they're all on a single scrolling page. Makes it easier to get through the information very quickly. And when the check images are pulled into version 2, when you put the payee name on a check, you actually write it in, it will populate into that export file, so you're getting the most benefit out of it as well. So before we kind of conclude this here, if there's any other questions, any other ways we can be of assistance?
This is Farshid.
Sure.
With a single login that we have as an account manager for some of these institutions like American Express, that we can bring in a large number of different clients' information down, will we be able to do the similar thing with Ledgersync, to use that login to have access to all different clients' information for Amex?
So that's interesting. I actually have not seen that. So you have one user login for American Express, and that gives you access to a portal for all of your different clients?
Correct. We have to set up that client to have our user ID as the account manager for their account. And once we do that, then that single user ID that we have for the firm will give us access to all the different clients that have given us an account management access through their Amex.
So my instinct on that is you would not want to do it that way, because it would have a hard time distinguishing, and then you wouldn't be able to separate it out per the different clients. So as an accountant, really the best way to do it is you would want your clients to be able to log in, add in their bank accounts here through their credentials that would be necessary. And that way it's ensured that you've got the one-to-one type relationship. And then basically what this app does is it does much like the account manager aspect of Amex. This then aggregates all those accounts and shows everything into one place. So the answer is no, I don't think you'd be able to do that capability.
Okay. And then a follow-up question that I guess I have is, we were an ex-Ledgersync client. We signed up on release 1, but we couldn't work with it for a number of reasons, and mostly the performance and all of that. As we're re-examining the Ledgersync. And I know that you mentioned I know I got on a little bit late onto the webinar, but what is the major improvement on the performance side of the version 2 over version 1?
Great question. Speed. Big time. So version 1, at this moment, full transparency wise, version 2 is lacking some of the features that version 1 had at the moment. Version 1 had, the biggest thing is the check images because they're still coding that out for version 2. But let me pull back up and I'll show you very quickly like the speed of pulling up transactions. It's night and day difference. So if I'm in version 1, the old version right now. I'm going to click on transactions real quick here.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see it's spinning at the top here, telling me it's kind of doing something. And it's going to take it a moment, of course, before it pulls this up. But this, literally, that part right there, time-wise, in comparison to come into here, go back to the top, we'll choose an account, go to transactions, already there.
I see.
So that speed is like the biggest difference. They have literally rebuilt the entire application on a whole new platform to make it much more scalable and much more capable moving forward. So like even statements is a great example. Come into statements. I'm gonna actually come here, watch, I'll go, it's still spinning on the other one. Statements, I'm gonna pull one up, open it. Now I'll come back here, still loading. So I definitely, again, as a non-paid employee of the company, I suggest a little bit of a patience as they continue to build out the majority of these other features into it, because they're doing everything they can to make this as quick as possible and as rock solid as possible. The expected timeline at the moment is by the end of August. They expect all of the majority of all of the larger institutions that the deposit and check images would be available again.
And then the other question I had was on the version 1,
Mm-hmm.
The banks that had additional layer of security with using a token.
Multi-factor? Yeah.
Like a Citibank. We're in California, so in Citibank, there's a token that you have to type in the code every time that you want to log in. Has that been resolved with version 2, or are we still looking at same issues?
So that is not resolved and cannot be resolved. The reason being, if you're talking about the same little token thing I've got a little calculator looking thing that I have to actually type that in every time. There is no choice about that. So we have a client that has the same thing, and her advice is change banks because there is no way. It's an internal thing that they've set up.
Okay.
Now, for most of the banks, though, the multi-factor authentication, it does actually do a much better job of grabbing the token and saving it. So you should see less requests for tokens, but you should always be prepared for it just to be safe, of course.
So do you know how QuickBooks Online gets around that issue? Because with QuickBooks Online, certainly, the linkage breaks every once in a while, so you have to reestablish that. But for a large part, once you authenticate yourself with that token that very first time, it seems like it maintains its authentication. So every time that you log into QuickBooks Online, the data gets downloaded from Citibank, same institution.
So I should clarify, just to make sure we're talking apples for apples. There is a multi-factor authentication where it's they send a pin to your phone, and then you take that pin and you type it in, and then it recognizes you and you're good to go. Mm-hmm. And then there's also, it just happens to be with Citi, there is a totally different layer of multi-factor authentication where it's an independent little key fob that keeps changing the number based on time. So no matter what, you always have to keep putting that one in.
Right.
in the situation that we have for that client with QuickBooks Online, we have to go download their transactions all the time because we can't get it to stay connected in QuickBooks Online. If you're having success, I'd love to talk to you to find out how you're making that part work so we can get it to work as well. Does that distinction, are we talking the same thing?
Right. Yes, absolutely. I'm talking about that little fob thing that, as you said, no, the numbers change. So
And that stays connected for you?
It stays connected.
Wow. Okay.
Online, and I don't think that's, certainly we haven't done anything special about that. We just go through the, get connected process in QuickBooks Online. And as I said, now every once in a while it says, the connection lost, so reestablish. So you have to do that. I get that. But it's not necessarily every single time that we want to log into QuickBooks Online that we have to bring the fob out and re-enter the code at that point. It's connected.
So it's something I'm going to talk to my team on for us. We can double check into that. Literally, we've continued on with our firm to have that issue. So I guess I actually gained something great out of this meeting as well. May I contact you after this and talk to you a little bit more about it?
Absolutely. So let me just move on a couple of things that if I may, I don't want to take everyone else's time, but the problems that we faced before was certainly the Citibank issue, which unfortunately, a large number of our clients in California are Citibank clients. And then there was the issue of, the speed, which you addressed. The third thing was an ability to get a QuickBooks. For the most part, we're a desktop, QuickBooks Desktop Enterprise Edition. So they're a little larger clients, and that we have to stay in the enterprise because of the limitation of whatnot. Now, are you able to, aside from the Citibank, like Chase and B of A and Wells Fargo and all the other non-Citibank institutions, are you able to download the QBO at demand, or it has to go through some sort of process that we have to?
On demand, and I'm glad you should ask such a question. The part of the way, so I've worked with Maurice as like a technical consultant for quite some time, but it ended up leading me to actually creating my own application called Ledgerysnc. Ledgerysnc is very specifically for QuickBooks Desktop, QuickBooks Enterprise. And what it does is it allows you to take your banking transactions, you would Ledgerysnc between your desktop enterprise file. It pulls up your chart of accounts and your vendor list, so you can make the correlation between a vendor and an account you would like it to use, right? So if you go into the vendor, you can do that same thing with a whole bunch of clicks. So then when you pull in transactions, what will happen is, matter of fact, I'll just randomly grab something to pull in here. What will happen is it's going to use the actual vendor list from your company file to search through the names and try to automatically name and suggest files that are inside of here. So I'll pull up.
Just like what QuickBooks does for an import facility, is that the same concept?
You got it. That's exactly right. So I'll pull up this one. Actually, there it is. Something that's somewhat related. So I'll pull the file up, it's going to upload it, pull it in, and once this pulls in, you should see that it's going to, again, this is a random quick check, but based on the names it finds within the actual memo, it's going to try to auto-suggest different names for the transactions. Now, what we've also done, though, is because you can have something like Intuit's a great example where if you use just the word Intuit, you can actually categorize it incorrectly. We also have the ability for aliases inside of here that my favorite example is AT&T, right? It could be AT ampersand T, AT space T, or ATT. And if you add in the alias through the vendor area, it'll search through all the aliases as well as the names, and then try to suggest the best name for you to use. Once that's done, and you go through and you actually assign, so I'm going to very blindly come in here, I'm going to say accept all suggestions. Mm-hmm. If you've created that relationship between the vendor name and the category, it's going to show you the account that you've assigned to it on the side here. The reason that what that does is it lets you know it's been categorized. You would then export the QBO file from here, and you still go in through like the bank feed area of desktop or enterprise. But because it would actually have the proper payee name, it's now going to automatically suggest those in QuickBooks Desktop also. So one of the things that we created a little while back, and I can shoot it over to, is a workflow guide. It's called the Remote Accounts Toolbox is what I deemed it. It's where you take basically QBox with Ledgersync and VendorSync, combine the three together. QBox would go grab the company file for smaller companies, not really enterprise, but grab the smaller file, bring it back to you. While it's doing that, you go to Ledgersync to go grab all your transaction details. You know, if you enter in the check-in images or the names from the checks, because you'd still need that. But then you would export your bank file, pull it into VendorSync real quick, and it's going to help you put the names on all the rest of the transactions as quick as possible. So the concept being the least number of clicks would win. Once you finish that part of it, you export the file, pull it into desktop, and it will actually, again, start showing you automatically suggested items inside of there. More importantly, if you have somebody that's writing checks out of the company file already, it's going to do its best to auto-match that stuff. So we purposely go through that bank feed on purpose so you don't get the duplications. I will shoot you over kind of that guide, and I could set up a time to actually do a more formal like introduction of it if you'd like. But happy to help answer questions with that.
Yes, I definitely would welcome that, either as an email communication, send whatever you have, and or if we can have a one-on-one follow-up conversation with someone from your side, that would be great. We're very interested to explore that and just see, how that works. Let me ask one other question, if I may, because I don't know if I missed something here. Were you suggesting that as part of what you were showing me on the QBO, the interaction with the QuickBooks download, that information is per client, meaning that when I have AT&T, with all its variation that I have, if I go to the next client and they have the similar type of thing, that information, I need to redo that as I'm expecting to do that, right? It is at that level, which is fine. I just want to make sure I understand that. And then the other thing is that, did I understand you correctly that when you were going through this match or fixing the data import or export, however you want to look at it, that at some point, then I can just load it into QuickBooks, or is it still a QBO at that point, and I have to go to desktop and then do an import of that QBO file?
Good question. So you still have to create a QBO file. So VendorSync is another step along the journey. It kind of goes in between, whether it's from the bank straight to desktop or really from Ledgersync into desktop. You would go through VendorSync first, because what it will do is, if you took it just to desktop or enterprise, keep those being the same thing, you'd have to pull it in, and then you'd end up utilizing either the renaming rules inside of the program, or you'd be keying in name, category. The difficulty we found is with the rules inside of QuickBooks, the more you have, the slower the program gets. So we figured out a way that you can basically do most of the same work without a single rule at all. We usually will do a rule for like deposits, because we want to, contain all the deposits in one area, so we can do like a breakout of them, and maybe one for checks, and that's it. But because we actually go in and through the web connector, we hard code each vendor and an account that's related to it, it will then automatically suggest, once you pull the transactions in, because the right payee name is there, it suggests the category for you. But you still have the ability, by going through the bank feed, to make last minute changes, to do splits, to assign a customer, all of those things.
Okay.
It's keeping the power in your hands, basically.
Does it work on a server setting?
Great question. Yes. So now, just to be safe, because right networks is always the fun one for everybody, right?
That's who I have.
Okay. So from my understanding, I have to reconfirm this, Right Networks was supposed to have just recently updated their platform. The reason everybody tends to have difficulties with Right Networks is when you log into your account, the address that your company file is on is different all the time. It's not like it's not a dedicated IP address. So what happens is when you have programs that try to map to that, and it's bouncing around because of how Right Networks is attributing its resources, you run into difficulties. But I believe they just did an update that was supposed to correct that.
Does it have a chart of accounts limit on how many accounts I can have?
Good question. That seems very related to QuickBooks Online, huh? No, not at all. You have full capabilities, 100% of QuickBooks Desktop. You can do as many accounts as you want, so no limits at all with that. Little tip, which you guys are not hearing from me, okay? If you're ever needing to update somebody from desktop to online, when you convert from desktop to QuickBooks Online, any accounts that you have in your company file don't count towards your number. So those limitations between QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Online Advanced, it's a little workaround for right now. Does that help you out, Christopher?
It does. Our small chart of accounts is 1,500, and then we have large ones.
What? 1,500?
Yeah, that's our small ones.
Wow. We don't have any limits, but I haven't come across that. That's a really big chart of accounts. Okay.
I had one more follow-up question, if I could.
Sure.
So with reference to the bank statements, it said that you could do a 6-month look back. Does that mean that you cannot bring in statements outside of that 6 months? Because you said you could also bring them in one at a time as well. So if like we wanted to pull back a year's worth of statements.
Joseph, what's the ruling on that one, my friend? It's probably a Maple. Give him a quick second here.
As of now, it's 6 months. There might be the possibility they'll be changed to greater than that, but as it stands, it's only 6 months.
Okay, so that's good to know because we have a process when we onboard clients. Sometimes we ask them to send us that information, but it helps to know how far back we can go.
It's a great question. Good point. Yeah. Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is there a trial version where you can try this out for a couple weeks?
Yeah. Actually, there is. It's a 30-day trial.
And is the trial version 1 or version 2?
Version 2.
Version.
Yeah.
So that's going to be limited to some of the things right now. I mean, if I'm going to trial this, would you say wait till August or start now and just know that some of these features are coming on board?
So if you are, especially in an environment like QuickBooks Desktop environment where you do not have any bank feeds whatsoever, I would say get started right away, of course, because you'd still have to go gather all of those transactions. You're also going to save a lot of time by having those statements delivered to you right away. The one area that, again, just full transparency, because the check details aren't there yet, because they need to build it right the first time, you would still have to gain that information in an additional way. So if it's not on a statement, that would be one area where the full value is not baked in all the way yet.
Okay. No problem.
So,
Matt, one other quick question. When we have a login to, let's say, Chase Bank, and the user has given us that login that we have access to a lot of additional accounts, even though we don't need to have it. In Ledgersync, can I limit the accounts that my side needs to see?
Good question. And so the answer to that is in version 2, at the moment, there are not any limitations at the moment. It's going to actually try to pull all accounts in. In version 1, they did have it set up, and I believe it's, again, planned for the very near future, that the client, on the client side specifically, they have the ability to choose which ones to hide. The accountant doesn't, because then you'd have the ability to turn them on and off. But I do believe that that is expected to be slated for the very near future in version 2. Joseph will do a follow-up with some of the timeline of these details, of course.
Okay. And then the other question I had was, what kind of a rights do I have as far as an ability to change different right level for my staff? What do you offer?
So the way they have set it up previously is you do have the ability to do employee access, and you can choose which accounts, or which client, I should say, which clients they have access to. Mm-hmm. Once you're at the client level would be the real distinction, or the changing. You wouldn't be able to do, like, say, split a client in half and only do certain accounts. It would be per client that you could do it.
Okay. All right.
We love it. Again, I think I gave the example earlier that when we have office managers, I will actually add the office manager on as an employee, and then we only give them access to just their own company's file. And it's a great way to kind of, get them to work with us, if you will, and provide them access to all the different accounts all in one place. It's nice and secure. So that means the client doesn't have to give away username and passwords to even an office manager.
Okay. Back to that QuickBooks integration, or QBO, and a QuickBooks sync that you do.
Yeah.
How do you sync the deposits? If the deposits are meant to be synced against the undeposited funds, because of the payment and deposit step, do you have that ability, or we just have to do QuickBooks?
So again, very, very good question. What we do, that's where what we would do is actually create like one rule specifically for deposit details. At Parkway, we created a special account called Revenue Query, and that was primarily because you couldn't create rules for uncategorized income, so Revenue Query is just a fancy way to say it. And we take all of our deposits and we put everything into there until we can go back in and then do the actual breakout of individual deposits when we have the deposit detail. That makes it to where we can then match it, of course, to the undeposited funds, so we're basically doing a flip-flop swap for it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Love the questions. Actually, I enjoy doing this part the most, of course. If there's anything else I can help on, any other questions?
No, I think that's good. I'm going to have to pop off, but thank you so much, Matthew, for your time.
Absolutely. Last thing I'll let you guys know, I happen to be one of the founders of a Facebook group. It's called QB Community Live. We openly invite you guys at any time if you want, jump in. If you ever got questions, feel free to jump into there. They can answer it. We've got small business owners, accountants, large and small, and we're always trying to populate new content in there. So I'm always happy to help on any topic I can.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Matthew, how should I have a follow-up on this? Is this something that you guys will reach out to us? Or
what I was going to ask for real quick here is to get, do you mind sharing your contact information over this, or through the chat?
I just don't know how to do it.
Okay, perfect. Then
Matt,
go to the bottom.
Matt, I can send it to you afterwards if you like.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So Joseph will actually help connect us, and then I will reach out to you. I will try to reach out a little bit later today, probably tomorrow. I'm taking a friend back to Burbank real quick. So, but would be more than happy to help connect with you. Absolutely.
That sounds great. Thank you. I look forward to it.
Great. Guys, thank you so much for your time today, and have a wonderful day and a very successful week, okay?
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.